Chris, I appreciate you coming back on, and I'm excited. Well, I want to say excited, but I'm interested because you were one of the main, I'll say, detectives from Maine State Police regarding the Lewiston mass shooting, or AKA the Lewiston 18. It was a shooting that occurred on October 25th, 2023, and 18 victims. For purposes of this episode, we're not going to mention any victim names. We don't talk about mass shooters. We're not going to give them a platform either. But there are a lot of questions just investigatively that I have, and we're going to get hopefully into a little of the details of how it all kind of went down and what the investigative steps were. And then as much as you can talk about through the prosecution, the defense, that kind of thing, and how that went. But I appreciate you coming on. I look forward to getting into it.
Well, appreciate you having me back on.
Awesome. Mo, you and I will just kind of jump in, and it's a little easier with video. We can just kind of look at each other and know. But Chris, I'll let you just kind of lay it out, and then we'll start peppering you with questions.
Yeah, I think the big thing, this is my thoughts, my opinions. It doesn't have anything to do with the agency that I work for right now, or any of the other agencies that were involved. Like I said, these are all my opinions. I may say I or we. I don't want it to be confused of I was one small cog in a big wheel. I was just the supervisor of a bunch of detectives for the state police. And as I, for all the local and county guys that showed up. So I'm just a small cog. If I say I or we, I'm not saying myself in general. I just mean the law enforcement side. And then, I think we'll talk about the investigative side, but the big thing is to remember the guys that went running in right away, some of them right from the range with minimal firearms, minimal ammo. Those are the guys that came to bat that day. So we'll talk about the investigative side, but those guys deserve a lot of, and girls, local county wardens, you name it. They're the ones that credit. I'm just the investigator. And then if any victims' families happen to be listening or come across this, know that, we were just there to speak on their behalf, and we did everything in the best to make sure they got the answers that they could. Obviously sometimes people don't get all the answers they want, but we worked hard for them. And again, we're sorry for their loss, and everything we did was for them, believe it or not.
Absolutely. I understand that. Well, actually, before we get into it, do you have any idea how many agencies touched on? I mean, I'm assuming every single one in Maine.
I mean, just statewide, you had every state law enforcement agency respond. You had, I think, every 3-letter federal agency respond. You had, so it occurred in the city of Lewiston, which is law enforcement wise, the second biggest police department, municipal police department minus the city of Portland in the States. You had Lewiston, Auburn, and then all the surrounding communities that had police departments. You had sheriff's offices. I couldn't tell you, it had to be in the state of Maine, 30 agencies, if not a few more. And then I saw people from out of state that just showed up. So I couldn't tell you, but it had to have been 800, 900, maybe 1,000 officers over the course of the 3 days that made an appearance, and, well into the 300s probably that first night. And for here up this way, that's a large, very large response for us when you have 3,000 law enforcement officers statewide.
Yeah, no, for sure. Well, let's just start from the beginning, because I don't want to get bogged down in the investigative questions, but when did it start occurring? When did the call come in? Like, what was that process?
So the way it works for us is, I think we talked about it on one of the other ones. We do all the homicides in the state minus the city of Portland and Bangor. So for me, I'd actually just gotten home from a family member's swim practice. So I dropped him off. I had sat down at the kitchen table and my phone rang. It was just a little after 7, and the name on it was one of the supervisors for the Lewiston PD's criminal investigative division. And usually when he calls, I know I'm going to work. And I think I made some funny comment of like, oh, great, it's never good when you call, or, me being me, I'm kind of a wise asshole. So some funny wise ass comment, and there was complete silence on the other end of the phone. And then he goes, "You haven't heard?" I go, "No, what's going on?" He goes, "We have multiple victims down at 2 locations, both deceased, and we don't know where the shooter is." So I said, "Okay, we'll get going. I'll get everything going." I said, "Just secure where you're at, secure the scenes, and we'll start getting people rolling." And then as the supervisor, my role is to get the major crimes unit response going. So that entailed making phone calls to my supervisor, to our dispatch center to see if they were aware, and then start calling detectives and just saying, "Hey, start to Lewiston. I don't have much information
Yeah.
I think it was like 7:15ish that I was called. I didn't realize at the time, but that was like 6 minutes after the second 911 call. So what happens is this individual goes to a bowling alley. I think there's 7 people at that location that he kills, that are still on scene. 3 are transported to the hospital where they die. And then he goes to basically on one side of the city, goes across the city to another location where he kills 8 more.
Mm.
There were 3 that were pronounced deceased at the hospital. So you have all that going on. The first call was at like 6:56, and the second one was a little after 7, like 7, might have been 7:12, and I think he called me at like 7:18 or something like that. Without looking at my report, I can't remember the times specific. Yeah. But so I didn't realize at the time that that was kind of what was going on, that he was calling me minutes almost after getting to the second scene. And then the rest of that first couple hours was just me making phone calls, calling, because I have to go. We have a process that we do for homicides. So my approach was, it has to stay the same. I understand that we have a large scale incident, but I have to keep everything as routine as we possibly do, because I'm thinking of trial further down the road. So, I'm driving and, I'm making phone calls to our other major crimes guys saying, hey, I need you and your team to come down. I know I have a bunch of victims that are from hospital, so I need you guys to come down because I'll need you to go to the hospital. I'm calling our prosecutors to bring them up to speed, our evidence people, our tactical team. I'm calling them saying, because he was aware of it. He's like, is this legit? And I said, yeah, it is. And that's normally what we do in some of those cases. I'll just go direct with the supervisors and then they begin their response, all while trying to get our people rolling with the understanding when we get there, our job as investigators is not like patrol level. So I had to stress, go right to the PD and don't do anything else, because natural instinct is, what do you want to do? The radio's chirping, like you could hear it.
Yeah.
It's chirping, and that's not our role. Our role is to do the investigative side, not to try to find this guy right away. Be boots on the ground. So that's kind of how it started.
Go ahead, Bo. You first.
I just have it because I'm listening to you tell us, like, as this is happening play by play, but I'm thinking in my head, you get a call like that. This is a call that, even though it's on the news a lot, unfortunately, this is not something that happens every day. This is not the call that we are, even as law enforcement officers, used to hearing and dealing with every day. How do you, in that moment when you get the call and you realize, after you joke with your friend and he's not giving you anything back, what is your mind? How quickly are you able to take the emotion out and switch into, all right, it's time to go to work?
Probably almost, for me, instantaneous. It was once I heard the seriousness in his voice. I know him. I've known him for a long time. As soon as there was like that silence, I was like, oh, okay. And then it was just, for me, it was like, all right, we always say we never want it to come, that moment when the bell rings. We want to be ready. And I just said, it's time to go to work, and it's time to do everything that I would normally do on any other homicide. I have to just start rolling it right to work. I mean, I was at my house, so like I have a great support system here. They packed me some stuff in a food bag. They grabbed a shirt and a tie for me so I could make the phone calls that I needed to make. And then I think I was out the door, and Lewiston's about 40 minutes driving routine from my house. So I'm called a little after, let's just say 7:15ish. And I was on scene at the PD before 8:00. So it was right to work. And then as I'm driving, it's going through, what are we going to do? And the first thought through my mind is, we got to figure out who he is. Once we figure out who he is, the rest will start. But that's going to be the first 20, that's my first goal. Who is he? And then we'll go from there. And then, yeah, it was weird. It was like, right, for me, it wasn't it was emotional when you hear it. You're going, oh, wow. But it was, I gotta just, it's time to go to work. I'd say the training that I had through our academy kind of taught me how to, all right, you can joke around, and then when it's time to go to work, it's time to go to work. And it seemed to come relatively quick.
Yeah.
For me anyways.
Second part to my question is, now you're a supervisor. So now it's not just keeping your emotions in check. Now you have all these type A detectives under you that are needing to deploy and do a job, not necessarily always the job that we want to do, though, because all of us cops we want to go find him. Let's do that. So how do you keep their focus in this moment as well?
So I think for me that was clearly established when I started making the phone calls, was go directly to the PD. Don't go to the scenes. Go. Because anytime we've had a homicide in that city, we will all go to the PD. We'll meet. We'll brief. We'll divvy out assignments. Maybe if someone gets there early and there's a witness or something, they know what to do. So it was just go to the PD, and if you beat me there, let's get our board going. Let's get everything going. I'm very fortunate that the group that we had in our unit down here know what to do. So a few of them beat me there, and they were getting the boards going, and the information that we had, trying to start establishing that stuff. But there was a few hiccups, you can say, with some people kind of going out of their lane, but they weren't detectives. They were supervisors above me, actually. But the rest of that was, I'm very fortunate that the guys and girls that I have working for us and working for me understood that, hey, as much as we want to go freaking find this guy and we want to be the one that slaps the cuffs on him, we want to be the one that, takes him down and puts him away. Our job as detectives is to be the investigators. We're the ones that somebody may put the cuffs on him, but we're the ones that are going to be on the stand later on in trial, not those guys. And I don't want some guy to get off because we had somebody go rogue. So we were very fortunate that all of our people did exactly what was asked. Would I say that people self-deployed from other departments in other areas? 100%. That was an issue. From a patrol level standpoint, the whole 2.5 days, almost 3 days. Yeah, it's just about 2 days that it was occurring. But for our people, luckily, they knew what their role was, and they went right there and got things rocking and rolling.
Yeah. And in the moment, you guys had a pretty important role to figure out first who he was, like you said.
Yeah. And it's, I remember getting on scene to the PD, and they had an older PD. They have a new one now, but very small watch commander's office. And there was people everywhere. While we were there, it ended up being a false report, but a report of him actively shooting at a Walmart distribution center. So this city has one of those big Walmart distribution centers in the city on the outskirts. So it would have been where, if you look at where the two locations were, he could easily have accessed that very quickly from his second location. And it came across the air. And I remember doing something and then turning around, and the PD was empty. I think I'd run out to my car for something. Came back, it was empty. Everybody, they ran out of cruisers. I know one of our people gave a cruiser to somebody, and they grabbed people, and they were going. So it was one of the hardest things I've had to do as a police officer when it comes to being an investigator is stole my rifle, go back to my car. I stole my rifle. I kept my vest handy just because we didn't know where he was. And then I went back into the PD and sat there and listened and made a few phone calls saying, hey, this is information that we're getting, just passing you it along. But yeah, that's a hard part as an investigator. You want to go out and find it, but you have to take a deep breath and step back.
Yeah. We need that intelligence piece.
Yeah. And also how frustrating for that to have happened. But so how was it divvied up? Like, you got to control the scene. You got to interview witnesses. You got family members coming. You got to get people to the hospital. You got to process. I'm kind of getting a little overwhelmed in my own head. How was that divvied up?
So that was kind of what was going through my head as I was driving up there. So I started reaching out to other detectives from our agency, other supervisors. One of them, he works up out of the Bangor area. He runs a team of he has 7 guys up that way. I knew they were far enough north. I called them. I said, hey, dude, I need you to bring your team down here. I didn't even call any of our lieutenant. I just went right directly to him. And I said, I'm going to get your team down. And what I was doing in my head through it was trying to say, okay, let's break this down piece by piece. You have these locations, right, where we have a bunch of witnesses. So the Lewiston sergeant called me. I said, hey, find a location in your city. You guys know it better than I do, where you can transport all of them to. Secure it and transport all of the survivors, the witnesses, transport them there so we know they're in one location. I'll send a team to the hospital, and we'll have one group of investigators that are just going to work at the hospital. They're going to identify victims. They're going to identify witnesses, family, anything is going to be right at the hospital. And then I made a few other phone calls, and it's not just me, a bunch of us. Then it was, I called our tactical team, got them started down. I called our evidence people, he got in. The patrol function kind of had simultaneously, they started putting people in charge of each of the scenes. So you'd have well, this chief's over here at this scene. He's going to be in charge of, he's the incident commander for that scene right now. This lieutenant's over here. He's in charge of that scene. And that was kind of the first, like, really 10 to 12 hours. And then we started setting up the incident management stuff. I won't get into, that's kind of a whole separate.
Yeah, no, I got you.
That's kind of like, for me, I was trying to break it down into our unit, the guys and girls that work down here. We're going to be the ones that are going to do interviews. We're going to be the ones writing the warrants. We're going to be the ones, tracking down people or family or friends who are associates with him to build the criminal case, while also providing information on, does he have any other targets? Where could he go? Could these associates pick him up? That will be our goal. We'll have a group at the hospital, and then we'll have some of our other units come down in and help with tips, or, and that came over the course of time as it started to build that way. But that was kind of take it piece by piece. And I explain, it seems to come across as though it was this big, smooth process. Obviously, in any of these cases, it sounds smooth, but as we all know, I'm going in a straight line, and then I take a 90-degree left, another 90-degree right, and then another, and then I'm back on track because I had to divert. And it wasn't just me, it was good communication. The PD transported a bunch of the survivors, the witnesses who weren't injured, to a local National Guard, an old National Guard armory. It's got a big, like, gym.
Yeah,
I called one of
the
local sheriff's offices that I knew had a pretty big CID. They were in the next county just south of us where this occurred, and they had some responders on scene pretty quick. And I said to one of their captains who's in charge of their CID, and I knew their sergeant, I said, I want your unit to grab whatever other detectives you can, but you guys are going to be the ones that are going to be tasked with identifying which officers are with you. And you're going to go over and you're going to interview it was like 70 people or something like that. So they took federal, like Safe Street Task Force guys. They took some local PD off, like some local detectives, not many, because most of the local detectives were out on the street looking. Their whole detective unit, which was like 5 or 6 guys, and they went over and they identified each individual that was there and interviewed them. And with that, we just said, this is what we're going to look for and how we're going to want it done. Record the interview, make sure you take your notes, you're not going to destroy them. So we made sure we stressed what our expectation is, but we knew, and even I knew, you got to put your ego aside. As much as I'd love to say we could do it, know who can do it. And that's what we did. And they did a great job. They did a fantastic job. They went over, I think within like 3 or 4 hours, they'd interviewed over 70 people.
Oh,
Wow.
I mean, some of them, and that, the kicker to this whole thing is, we didn't realize it at the time, is the second location that he went to, it was a deaf community. So and we didn't know that. We knew it, but we didn't know it right away. So it was, then you were running into the issue of interpreters, or how do we communicate with them? And they worked through that. It took time to figure that out, to work through it, but it was one of those things that you had that in, and it's just, you got to break it down. Like, if you try to swallow the whole thing, and I think we all did this at points of trying to ingest the whole thing and do it all, it's impossible for anybody to do it. So if you just kind of break it down segment by segment, taking those, like putting your ego aside for a minute and saying, who can I have help me? And stress that we're going to do it this way, and you're going to do it our way, because it's going to be associated with us and our product at the end. And then you just chip away at it and, identify tasks. And the first one was, let's find out who he is.
Yeah, I couldn't imagine you showing up to a scene, the shooting is high level of intent, and then you're like, deaf doesn't matter, even if they spoke a different language. Like, you're like, it just kind of, I'm remembering some of the stuff that I did in Hillsborough. You almost feel defeated, like you're ready to go, and and then you get like you're saying, you're going in a straight line, you got a mission, you're like, wait, all right, time out, now I got to go this way and find someone to help me, and then processing that up.
Yeah, and that's what it was. And it was, you had tactical teams, you had I think in the end, I wish I had the number offhand, but of the 60, 70, I forget how many detectives number wise we have. I think all but 2 or 3 were down in Lewiston within the first 24 hours working. So every evidence tech that we had was working. So it's just kind of one of those, you got to go one at a time, and just task at a time, and plug away. And, really the big thing is you killing anybody else?
Yeah, I know. And while you're doing all that, you still gotta find the guy.
So, I mean, and that's kind of the first thing, right? Is, okay, we got to identify who is he? And that happened relatively quick, thanks to some great thinking from, and really thanks to 2025, as much as social media drives us all nuts and drives us crazy at times.
Yeah.
It's got its benefits, right? They were able to obtain a picture of him relatively quick from the surveillance footage of one of the locations. The local department put that on their social media. It got taken off by, the counties, and then the media took it. And, by 10 o'clock that night, we had identified a suspect.
Wow.
Pretty quick. Yeah, I think it was like between 9 and 10. I know, relatively quick, within a couple hours. We'd identified who he was. We'd identified that his phone device was at his residence. These are all things that I testified to in front of our commission that we had, and are all public knowledge. So it's not anything that's not already out there.
Yeah.
Within a couple hours, we knew his device was at home, had been home the whole time of the shooting. We knew who he was, and we started to do, who is he? Who are his associates? Who are his friends? And with that, the first priority was, one, where is he? And two, does he have any other issues with any other people? And that's kind of how we checked off the box. And then it was, okay, where, just because somebody says this is who he is, how do we know it's him? Well, we got a vehicle description. You go to the back, run the name. Okay, he's got a vehicle registered to him, and that name matches the vehicle that we saw in the video. Okay, now we're good. Family's saying it's him. And then, we move on to, okay, who's he got issues with? And then, they find the vehicle, and, there's people with names that are very similar, and one's really close to where the vehicle is. Let's go make sure we find that person, and then, check the area. Because they did find the vehicle shortly after we identified him, and the bolo came out for him. They found the vehicle in a parking lot, vacant. So then it was... Then you have a whole nother aspect of that, of now it becomes a criminal investigation plus a manhunt, which I'm trying to think offhand, and of the active shooters, mass shooter, I can't think of one that's hit 2 locations and fled. The last one I can think of that fled was the San Bernardino, out in California. Other than that, I can't think of many. They either fight law enforcement or take their own life shortly after. So you have that avenue, 2 locations and a suspect that fled.
Yeah. And
Go
with
ahead,
that, I just want to pause for a minute, because I think that people listening need to understand the gravity of a situation like that, even with seasoned law enforcement officers, that you have 2 different locations, you have all these victims, you have a suspect that is at large for all you at the time that you know of, and you're trying to manage all of these working parts to ensure that everybody is doing what's necessary, so that on the back end, when court becomes an issue, if we arrest this individual, how are we going to be able to prove what they did and hopefully subsequently get a conviction? It is so huge and overwhelming. Me being a law enforcement officer and hearing you talk about this, again, it's just one of those things that you look and you go, I'm in awe to hear. And when I was researching, that we were having you come on, I'm thinking the same thing you just said. Like, I don't know of a time where we had an active shooter that didn't stay at one location, that we didn't have the opportunity to at least encounter there, that we weren't able to identify because they happened to be there. There's, the Parkland shooter, he fled, but he wasn't fleeing and going to multiple locations. So it just creates a level of fear within the law enforcement community that is completely elevated, in my opinion.
Yeah, it's not, I said I went to both locations shortly after it happened with our primary investigators to get, we were getting different varying reports of how many were killed. So we had to, myself, the lead investigator, and 2 others went to both locations. And that is the first time I said, you're riding 2 we don't ride 2 to a car up here. So we're used to being pretty individual. So I said, the 4 of us we're going 2 to a car, and we're all wearing our vests. It's the first time I've walked in and through crime scenes in a vest. And just because we didn't know where he was. We didn't know, are we going to stumble across him walking in the road in the city? Because we were driving through the city. So, that added a whole different avenue of where is this guy? What's, he's already shown the capability and the want to cause serious, violence to people. We're going to find him. So we have to take those extra steps when we're out and about. But at the same point, we have to remember that we still do have that criminal case. And I joke with, I look at humor sometimes as a way to do it, but I joke and I said, as soon as I saw the 3-letter agencies start showing up, I said, I should have started packing them with air tags to try to figure out who was who, because I know getting a report later on down the road is going to be a problem. But it's stuff that officers, and people who you want to come help, but if you don't, there's systems in place that I know when you're just trying to help can be frustrating of like, I want to do this. Why aren't they telling me this? Why aren't they letting me do this? I could do it. It's the systems in place are there so that when I go to trial, 2 years later, I know which officers will where, who is doing what. And I have a way to track that and get the reports. And if you're just out willy-nilly doing your thing, or you're trying to help, and in the end you cause confusion, then you just show up like nobody has accountability. That was our part. We had to, the case concluded, we had to present to the commission put on by the governor here in the state. We had to present, and we had to provide they had access to all our reports. So I spent from November until mid to December trying to accumulate myself and a few others, every agency that showed up. And it was something I don't think people understand until you're on the other side of, you say, Mo and I say we show up at a scene and you get my report, but I'm reading, somebody's reading the report and they see our names together. They're going to want a report from Mo, wondering, 2 of you together. So then you have to track down my report, then have to track down Mo's report because 2 of you together. And so it was stuff like that that's what ended up being probably in the end the most time consuming and the most stressful once it resolved, was putting this all together in a nice, neat package, because there's a lot of work to one homicide, and then you do 18. It's just, I think we broke our records management system at one point, uploading information to it because of
Sure.
And then, I mean, it's stuff, that's the stuff that, the general public doesn't see and doesn't understand, is the time consuming stuff that in the middle of it, my goal is thinking of, all right, we're going to have trial. I need to account for every piece of evidence, every warrant, every interview, because if I miss something or something's not done, we all know how defense attorneys are going to work. Their job's to get their client off, and they're going to pick at the one thing we didn't do versus the 100 good things we did. That's what this case was probably one of the most challenging, was making sure accountability. Do we have everybody's report, and is it done?
Yeah, Mo, I like your perspective on this, but so I think I was overseas when this happened, because my kids were texting me, calling me. I had people that I knew that, because I used to be a trooper in Maine. They were like, I was like, I don't know anything. I said, but I know who's there. And I said, I know they're crushing it. And I was trying to articulate to non-law enforcement friends, because they're like, why don't they have them already? Like, there's a million people up there. How could they not find them, or whatever it was? I'm like, you have no understanding of the size and scope of the crime scene, what's having to happen. And I can just, on a smaller scale, I mean, my God, you show up to a traffic crash, you have 14 supervisors and everybody calling you. And I'm like, I just got here. I don't know what I have. Give me a minute. And let alone what you're talking about with dozens of agencies, victims, families. I mean, all the stuff going on. And then in your head, trying to, I need to make sure we control it as much as we can. And I'm assuming that really probably quickly the prosecutor's office was involved, making sure that, things are being done the way they like them. So I appreciate this, because a lot of people don't know that. And I remember looking on the news, because I was, again, making sure my kids are safe, because there was some news that broke that he had ties to close to where my kids were. And I was like, you guys need to be safe, hunker down, lock the doors, whatever it is, because I don't know what's going on. And I remember reading some comments, and still, again, having people reach out to me going, how come we don't know anything? Why aren't they saying anything? Why can't we help? And it's like, dude, they're trying to share information within themselves first and get their shit squared away. Not to mention, this guy is armed, dangerous, and clearly has the intent to kill. So the magnitude of it, I'm enjoying I keep saying enjoying, but for me, it's more like I can enjoy the investigative side and appreciate, I guess is a better word, appreciate the size and scope of what was trying to be done. And being on the federal side, I fully understand what you mean. It's like, I want to help. Appreciate it, bro. Not right now, because you don't know our systems, our database. I'm not trying to find you 8 months from now when you're like, bro, I don't know. I just was like, I'm just there to hang out. I'm trying to help. So I fully understand. So, well, I was going to move into, so that's the first night. I was going to move into the next day. Do you want to touch on anything before we move into the next day?
No. He answered my questions. Thank you.
Perfect. So then you're there the entire time until he's found, right? Just to clarify. Maybe a nap or something, but pretty much.
Well, Well, I think I went home for an hour and a half early Friday.
Okay.
Well, I'll caveat this. I went home for like maybe 2-3 hours on Friday morning, slept for
Yeah.
a little bit, went back, and then by 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock on Friday, I was actually ordered. It was a pride hit for me, but I was so exhausted that
Yeah.
I was beyond, when you get to the point where like you are trying to think and it's just like,
Not working.
there's nothing
Yeah.
coming out. So I went to one of the majors. I'm like, we're running thin, but I go, I'm trying to think here. And I'm like, I need some help. And he goes, you know what? Another unit had come in. He goes, because they wanted one of us who were local to be there. Pretty much one of the other supervisors had just gone home and they were on their way back within the next couple hours. He goes, we'll get it from here. He goes, I was ordered to go home and not come back until, he said, if I see you before, I think it was like, it's 2 p.m. If I see you before 1 a.m., if I'm still here, I'm going to be pissed. So I was home when they found him that night. I was actually sleeping, and my boss now is the one who, they call my wife because I put my phone on Do Not Disturb, and her phone calls come in as a private number. I had her name, but not her number. So they woke my wife up and gave me the phone and said, hey, we found him. So immediately I'm like, I pop up wide awake, like, all right, I'm coming back in. Like, where is he being transported so we can interview him? And they go, he was deceased. They found him deceased. He took his own life.
Got it.
So then it was, well, now I'm up. So I tried to settle down, watch the end of they had the typical press conference. So I watched that from my couch. I just couldn't go back to sleep. So I wanted to go back and help, but there was nothing for me to, I knew my work was going to come the next morning, which it did.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, I was there the whole time, just a few hours that he happened to be found. I was, trying to study the back of my eyelids so I can remember my own name.
Yeah. At some point there's a breaking point.
Fair.
So let's take us through that day, because I remember, again, I'm remembering via the news, and I think actually I texted you. It might have been the day that he was found. He hadn't been found yet. I said, hey, man, I know you're slamming and jammed. I said, I hope everything's good. And just kind of like checking in. It wasn't like, hey, can I do anything? Because there's nothing I could do. But I was just said something. And I think it was like 10 hours later. You're like, yeah, we found him and a lot of work. It was something real short like that. I said, no worries. I'll hit you when I get back in stateside. And then it is where it is. But can you take us through? So I understand, again, the collective agency and, have to do that. So we know we're trying to look for him. How'd that look?
Yeah. So that first night by, I'd say like 11, 12, 1 a.m., it started to smooth out a little bit. They had set up a command post at the local high school. So we were transitioning from the PD over to the high school, which was a perfect center, had a huge cafeteria. They were setting up cots. They had locations for like our unit went and set up base somewhere. They had our members assistance team and chaplains showing up to set up. They had our digital units showing up to set up. You get into early, it's Wednesday. So you're talking early Thursday morning now. If you know the city of Lewiston, it's always, it's a city, right? It's always 2 o'clock in the morning is 11 o'clock for them in the afternoon. I will never forget, probably till the day I die, that it's 2 o'clock in the morning. I'm finished. I'm one of the last ones to leave the PD. I sent all our people over, making sure we have what we need, documenting all the stuff we have on our board so we can transition over. And I'm driving through the city, and like straight out of a movie, the only other vehicle coming the other way is an armored car, an armored tactical, like a Bearcat or something. Yeah. Just driving through an area that should be hopping with people. So we transitioned over to the high school, which allowed us a little more space, allowed us to be in certain rooms. And then, like I said, our goal was then, all right, now comes the fun part of, we know who it is. We've briefed the prosecutors on what we have. We're going to type an arrest warrant for him, because I knew, yes, we would label it as a person of interest right away. We knew it was him. It's a videoed homicide investigation. So that avenue's covered.
Yeah.
But we knew that for the general public, probably something to do with, say, we have an arrest warrant for him. We have a warrant for his arrest. I think just sometimes that word versus person of interest makes people feel safer that we know who it is and it's not just some random person. So I had people working on that. We'd identified where his house was, and there were officers and tactical teams securing that. We knew he wasn't there, but securing that because we needed to do a search warrant. So all through the night, it was assigning tasks to do search warrants. for cell phone related information for his house, the vehicle that we found, right? His vehicle that's found there. So we spent the night and into the next day, into Thursday morning, writing search warrants, conducting interviews with certain family members, conducting maybe interviews with, other possible witnesses. And then we were very fortunate. We had a whole nother group of people that were out making notifications to next of kin. So that once we identified all the victims, we had a group that was just tasked with going out and making notifications.
Mm.
Luckily, our state partners, up here in New England, we have that. I think we talked about it before, like the NESPAC compact with other New England State Police agencies. And, early on, we reached out to New Hampshire and they sent us a team of their major crimes unit that came over just to speak to another agency. They sent 2 detectives to the autopsies in Augusta, and they performed or documented all but I think 3 of the autopsies for us. So our evidence people could process, the crime scenes, the vehicle, all that stuff. They manned a tip line. So it was getting those tips. And then I saw a guy matching that description walking down, at the Burger King in Springfield, Massachusetts, just pick someplace random. So then we have to follow that up. And then we had other things throughout this investigation that were like those odd things that the red herrings of an investigation. You had a vehicle in the parking lot with the window cracked that had, like, you looked in and there was 3 or 4 AR style rifles and a bunch of magazines. So we're like, so it's a New Hampshire plate. We hadn't identified anybody with a New Hampshire plate in either our victims or our survivors or our witnesses. So we're like, is this tied in? Was there something going on? Around the same time, some idiot decided he'd insert himself and say that he was with our shooter. And so you now have this vehicle and you have somebody else saying that they were tied in. And so we spent a majority of late Thursday into early Friday morning tracking down these leads or these red herrings that you want to call it, that took resources away from looking for him.
Yeah.
Because it was, does he have a co-conspirator? Is he have anybody else involved? So it was assigning detectives to do that. Luckily our partners in New Hampshire took care of that and we ironed that out, early Friday morning. But majority of Thursday, I did take a little bit of a nap in there in the parking lot, was really spent just doing the interviews and the tasks that a lot of people don't see. And then providing, the incident management started up. The divvying out the tasks to go look to check locations, search warrants, and then documenting the search warrants and what did we find in the search warrant? Anything in those warrants going to help us try to find where he is. So that's what a lot of that whole second day was going, and starting to get into those operational periods of, all right, we're going to work this set of hours and who are we sending home? Who are we bringing back? I had a couple detectives that I was going to task with. If they found him, their job was going to be, one was the primary and the other one was one of our best interviewers. Their job is strictly going to be to interview him. So they're going to stay at the command post, kind of do some odds and ends sorts of stuff. But hey, I'm going to kick you out early. You're going to go home and get some rest. Just be ready. If we find him, you're coming back. So it's developing those tasks and the preparing for, into that whole Thursday of the prosecutors started showing up. So now it's, we're going to go to the scene so they can kind of see what we're talking about. We're very fortunate. Our prosecutors are very hands-on. So they like to actually get eyes on some of the scenes so they know when we talk, they understand what we're talking about because they've seen it. So, they went through that. You had just the crime scene work alone that day. They had to coordinate with our medical examiner's office to document the scene and then to identify each of the victims and then to properly document where they were located and who they are and then prepare for transport to the ME's office. That's what that day, we're now starting to get into that. Okay, once that first task is done evidence wise, then we're going to move to the next one. And leads are coming in, tips are coming in, all that sort of, I think there were 800 and something plus tips that came in less than a 48-hour span. And when I mean they were weird, I went through every one. I think he's in a bunker in you name some random location up here. Okay. And then you got to kind of task somebody to try to, does he have any connections to that? It's like,
Yeah.
you look back on it now and it's funny because some people are just trying to be helpful, and not one tip that we got provided. Some where he ends up found, we already had on a list of locations, and they found him eventually on a secondary search, a trailer. He was found in a trailer, and they found that on a secondary search. And the media, just like you said, for the comments, they kind of were like, well, why didn't you find it right away? It was less than a mile from where his car was found. And wasn't that on the list? That, yes, it was a location that he had worked at in the past, but there were we had to prioritize, right? Like, we couldn't find an alleged female acquaintance that supposedly he had issues with. So that's, well, we've all been a part of those. Where is she? So we find her. Like, that jumps a place that he used to work at, things like that. So it was just kind of going through and prioritizing where he would be when the detectives were out doing the interviews. It's, tell us about him, where, what was he like leading up to this? And then it's, okay, who's he have for friends? Where does he hang out? And then so you had a whole secondary interview of trying to gather information and intel on where he might go. We know he doesn't have a phone. We sent people to check to see if he had bought a prepaid phone within a couple of days prior. Like, all those things are being done behind the scenes that are just taking time.
Yeah. It's incredible to think about the logistics of all those things that you're having to do, along with the investigative steps. You're having to try to manage getting your detectives sleep so that they can still be at their best to do the parts that they need to do while managing 800 tips coming in. It's overwhelming, logistically speaking. I have a question too, having not been from Maine. I've visited Maine, but never been in this area. And when you mentioned Lewiston, in my head, I'm not wrapping my head around how big of a place it was. I know you said it's the second largest agency, and that it's a place that was pretty hopping all the time. Is that the understanding? So a big city, what's the idea?
So I'll caveat this with, it's a big city for the state of Maine.
Fair enough.
It's not, maybe like a Sarasota style size city. I don't know how big Sarasota is, but
okay.
Back in the day, maybe, not now. Sarasota's huge now.
Huge. It's big for here, so it's a city for here. So you're talking early in the night, you usually have just the typical street dwellers, I guess the best way to put it. Those that, stay up all night and sleep all day are usually out and about running around. So it's big for up here, and where it's located. The best way to think of it is, if you look at the state of Maine, you have Portland. And then you have Augusta, and then Bangor is kind of believe it or not, Bangor is almost about halfway through the state. But if you look at Augusta and Portland, and Augusta is the capital, they're about 35 minutes south of Augusta and 35 minutes north of Lewiston. So it's like dead center between two hubs of the city, and probably, Tyler, 2 hours, and a little over from Boston, give or take.
Oh, yeah. Maybe,
so you're talking, it's a pretty, you have Bates College, one of the, like Bates, Bowdoin, Colby, those style schools.
Very high-end private schools.
Yes, thank you. That was the word I was looking for. But they're located, that's located in the city as well. So you had it's a very well-to-do private school. So you have that aspect of things going on. You have, you're 30 minutes south of Augusta, which is where the governor is. So you have the political avenue of these style, cases.
Right. Well, think of D1 in Hillsborough, the box, that area. That's the size of Lewiston as the city, because Portland has like 60, 70,000. Lewiston has 32, 33,000. I mean, again, whatever numbers vary. It's about 35 square miles. Perspective, Bangor has 300,000, but it's a massive, massive area. So it's hard to kind of explain unless you're in Maine, because people know those little spots. But think of District 1, and that's Lewiston.
I see. I just was curious, because when he says, like normally the street's hopping and here comes an armored car, and I'm thinking, in my head, Ybor City popped in my head, was like that. But I'm like, does that compare? I don't
think it's as bad as Ybor, but District 1 is bad. Yeah, because Ybor is wild right now. I wouldn't walk in the streets. Lewiston's not like that.
Not quite like that.
No. Certain areas, but
in certain areas are, but
yeah.
Yeah.
That leads me to my next question, and I don't know if you can answer this or want to answer it. The locations that were selected, were they random, or was there ties with this individual? I know that where he was found, there was a tie that used to be where he worked, but what about the two locations that he actually...
Yeah, he'd been known to frequent both locations.
Okay.
That's kind of what we figured. He'd been known to be at both locations, to hang out at both locations. So they were locations known to him. I don't like talking about kind of his background, because I hate giving him any credence for what he did. But he was saying people were talking about him, and some of those locations, I think, is where
some of that's in the news.
Yeah,
I was just curious if it was, like I said, keyboard popped in my head, so I was curious if this was a party district that he
no
had issues at.
The two locations are literally on almost opposite ends of so the city's got a very condensed area traditionally, and then as you start moving outside the city, it gets a little more rural. Not much, but for a city, it does. They were basically on kind of the north side, and then you go like the southeast side of the city. So they were at two completely different ends of the city. I didn't even know the bowling alley was there. I knew exactly where it was once I went there, because I'd been to that area, but I didn't know that there was a bowling alley out back there. And then where the bar was, I didn't know that was a bar. It was a well-known bar actually in the city. A lot of the locals were familiar with it and knew where it was. So there were two venues. There was a cornhole thing going on at the bar that night. There was a youth bowling at the bowling alley that night. So it was tragic, but we're very, very fortunate. It could have been a lot. You had two heroes in the bowling alley. If you look at the news, there's stories about them out there, but you had two heroes that I will say prevented more tragedy in the bowling alley. And you had a couple in the bar that did some things that, I have no problem saying it at the bar. Somebody killed the power as he was inside. So he couldn't see anymore. And the way we know that security camera went dead. So that action right there, I'm pretty confident saved lives.
Right.
So, it's super tragic. I'm not trying to downplay it, but very, very fortunate. It could have been a lot worse had people not stepped up to the plate.
Yeah.
Well, let me do this too, because you were explaining you had to work with evidence and the medical examiner. Because again, this is something I'm guilty of it as well. When you have these tragedies, the populace will go, of course he did it. He's guilty. Done. It's like, that's not how it works. When you have to present evidence, it's like this victim was found in this location next to it's almost like a layout. You have to do like a diagram for a lot of these. I'm not saying this, but like every shell casing is like labeled here. I mean, you get bogged down in the details, but the details are what matter. And it takes time. It takes a lot of time. And it takes a lot of manpower. Nothing will irritate me more than when they're like, well, of course he did it. And everyone just tunes out. It's like, you are dismissing thousands of hours of work and energy and effort that went into one, figuring that out, and two, now the work almost begins. I was talking about this the other day. It's like for every big event or, vehicle pursuit, definitely a shooting, something of that matter. It's like that is days, if not weeks, if not, as you were saying, months worth of paperwork and putting it all together. Anyway, I wanted to talk about like once they found the shooter, next steps, but did you have anything prior to that? I'm trying to stay on topic as best I can.
No. I'm good. He answered the questions I had just to get my head wrapped around the area and understanding that for somebody who's not from there.
Yeah, if you look up Lewiston, I mean, it's gorgeous. I mean, obviously I'm biased. Maine's beautiful. Lewiston is gorgeous, but it does have its sections, just like any city, I guess.
It's one of my favorite cities. It's got its good parts where it's very pretty. The college campus is beautiful. And then you go to other areas where I've done operations where I'm like, where we're literally going, is this bullet hole from this case or one others? And they go, oh, no, that one's old. We don't care about that one. We've had it. So, I mean, I think, Tyler, you hit something that a lot of people don't understand is, or law enforcement doesn't. Most do. If you've worked a homicide, I think you understand it. If you've worked it all the way through to trial, is we only get one chance to do it right. And when it comes to evidence and when it comes to putting these cases together, I don't get oops, I made a boo-boo and I can do it again. I get one chance. And if I make that mistake, I look at it, I explain it to newer officers or newer troopers. I go, your chance to learn is on the road when it's an OUI or a DWI, how they call it in Florida, I think.
Yep.
You make a mistake, you arrest a guy for, operating on the influence is drunk. You make the mistake, and I've done it. You administer field sobriety wrong. You forget to check their mouth before the breathalyzer, and you go to trial and the defense dumps it and it goes away, or you lose it in a jury trial. Okay, the guy I took him off the road that night. He didn't hurt anybody. He's got all these lawyers' fees.
Yeah.
Maybe he learns a lesson. If I make a mistake in one of these cases, my name, our agency's name is and reputation of all the people that work before me has just gone out the window. And two, and the bigger thing is, I am speaking for the people who aren't with us. No matter where they're from, what they've been involved in prior to that, I work for them. And, I think Geberth, he was a guy in New York, NYPD, says we work for God, and whether you're religious or not, it's they're deceased. We're working for them. So you only get that opportunity really once to do it right. So I think in my testimony to the commission, I explained that I would rather go slower and be questioned on why we were moving slower and do it right than be rushing and make a mistake that later on could lead to him getting off or something getting thrown out, or, worst case, setting case law that affects cases later on down the road. I can't, for the families in this, I know that time of waiting for us to say this is your loved one was probably an hour, probably felt like 10, or it felt like 3 days. I pray none of us ever have to deal with that, but I would rather make sure we made it right. And I did it right, and they waited a little bit longer than to rush and make a mistake, and it affects their loved one later on down the road. So I think you hit the nail on the head. That's the stuff that we're trying to do, because we only get that one opportunity.
Probably hard too, because you have families that they're hurting, and they are just trying to get answers, because as human beings, we think if we know the why, the how, the when, like all the parts, then it heals us somehow, which it typically doesn't. But, dealing with one victim family is one thing, but you had 18 victim families that had different situations and circumstances, and probably the immense pressure to get answers to them is still weighing on you while you're trying to make sure you're doing all these necessary steps too.
It's 2025 now. So with technology, and cell phones, where sometimes people know before we even know who they are. I was with, my best friend, and I saw this happen. And I haven't seen him since. And, they're calling families, but we have to verify on our end. It's for those families. I couldn't imagine doing it, but a lot of people forget too, just because we think it's an easy notification. Well, I don't know if that's my wife. Is that my wife? Is that my girlfriend? Am I going through divorce and I'm with this person? Is that someone that I'm estranged with? It's that whole avenue of trying to make a notification to the person we believe is the one that's supposed to be notified. That takes time too, because I don't want to notify somebody that wants nothing, say they got divorced or something like that. We don't want to notify the person that goes, I have no connection to that individual. Meanwhile, their poor family is wondering where we're at. And, now this person who we don't want to know or doesn't deserve the right to know now knows. So it's like, we're going to go slow. We're going to make sure we identify who we're supposed to be notifying, and because of how profile it was, a lot of people had called in. So we had a good list but then we had to verify, is that person really connected? And these were all but one were adults, which made things significantly a little more complex, I would say, because as adults, we know relationships can go, ebb and flow, and who you think they're married to, they're not. And so it's just, we went slow, and it was less than 24 hours. It was about 24 hours from the time of the first reports of the shooting till I'm pretty sure we notified every victim's family, which is relatively fast. If you think about these large scale incidents, it's relatively quick. And I think the public thinks sometimes, well, I'm going to talk to if it's a wife that is killed, I'm going to talk to the husband, the uncle, the brother, the sister. Like, no, I'm sorry. I would love to, but in that initial response, I'm talking to one person, and their job is to notify whoever. And we have great victim witness advocates, and that they did a good job of fielding an unbelievable amount of questions that allowed us to focus on the investigation and not have to try to go. And like I said, we had a group of officers, troopers, deputies. I don't even remember, to be honest, who was out making notifications, but it was a uniform presence and a chaplain were going out making notification.
Well, I want to get into if there's anything else you want to touch on, because I want to touch on the commission, because that's, again, I think most people don't understand, just because the suspect is no longer with us doesn't mean it just goes away and it's like, oh, cool, done, and you just move on to the next step. You're going to be held accountable regardless of the outcome. And I know it's something we don't like to talk about, but the immense cost to the state, to the county, to the cities, to the agencies, work in this case, the amount of bodies, the amount of calls that might have been delayed or gone unanswered for a little bit because they were looking at this. Why, I remember dealing, Mo, when we had the RNC down in Tampa, and it was like everyone worked 10, 12 days. I mean, more. I think I worked 10 days straight, 12-hour shifts. And basically, if it wasn't a felony or a people crime, hey, it's going to have to wait because we don't have bodies to work it, because everybody's focused on that. Most citizens don't give a shit about that. They want their problem solved now. I'm sorry that's going on in Lewiston, but I need you out here in the county, and I expect you to respond in a timely manner. What I'm saying is you have to account and answer for all that. If there's anything you want to touch on before that, I'm interested in the commission process as well, and I want to be respectful of the time.
Yeah, no, I think he's found it. It's like 7:40 something at night on Friday night. He's found, and then so when I left, let's say midday on Friday, 5 hours or so before he's found, you had the cafeteria of a very big city high school. There's like every seat's just about taken with officers, this, that. There's people everywhere in every room. There's food. There's everything. I come back. I got up early. As soon as I found, I was one of the first ones back there the next morning. I get up back. There was still a decent number of people there, but the cafeteria was basically empty. There were a few people coming and going. We go in, and our whole unit, we sent aside from the few that worked that night where he was found, everybody had gone home. Everybody came back the next day because we still had work to do. So myself, one of the other supervisors, our boss, and the primary investigator, along with the prosecutors, left the high school, and we're going to go to each of the locations where he was found, where the vehicle was found, and the two scenes, just to check in, see how everything's going, wrap our heads around what was going on, so we're aware of all the scenes. We're gone an hour and a half. I come back into the high school. The parking lot's just about empty. Just about empty. The doors that we had gone out of that had been propped were locked. Our command vehicle was gone. I'm banging on the door. Finally, I call a couple of our detectives that were inside. I'm like, hey, can you come let us in? We go in, 90% of the food's gone, gone. It's all cleaned up. Dang. And the only people that are left are our unit and some of our digital people who are out trying to do video canvases to grab video for the investigation. That's Friday, or that's Saturday. We work all day Saturday. Saturday night, we kick everybody out around, 5 or 6. Sunday, we ordered everybody, you're not working. You're done. You will not come to work. It can wait till Monday. Monday morning, the way our unit was at the time, and we have two sections, basically we're our southern unit, but we divide the south into a northern half and a southern half. I have the northern half, and my other supervisor has the southern half. The day this call came in, they were in the process of getting a search warrant for a subject that had just popped on a whodunit homicide that they've been working for 2 months. They'd just gotten some DNA, they just broke the case wide open. They dropped everything, came up, worked this Lewiston, and then Monday they went right back to that. So you have half the unit going right back to right back into the grind for that. Our unit, or my section, continued Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday in the city of Lewiston, making sure we identified all the vehicles that were there. We talked to somebody associated with it. Have we identified all the witnesses, just to be thorough? Even though he's deceased, we knew pretty early on Monday there was going to be a commission that was established by the governor. So we knew there were going to be questions that we were going to have to answer. So we started that. That was Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. Part of the day, Thursday, we had some new hire interviews. And on Friday, it was kind of a light day for everybody of work from your office, work from home. We're going into the weekend. They made an arrest Thursday night on that other homicide that they'd been working. Friday night, 8:00, I'm sitting in my chair in my house watching TV with the family, and my phone rings. And I look, and it's the same CID sergeant from Lewiston calling me, and I go, hello, and it's dead silent. He goes, hey, just giving you a heads up. We just had a guy dropped off the hospital with a gunshot wound to the head. They don't think he's going to live. We were back in the city that night. So my section, I called it, we had two guys that had found out that they interviewed Thursday for a position with us. They found out Friday morning from the colonel they were going to be selected to work in our unit. I called them Friday night. If we didn't have them, we were in trouble. I called them in, their experienced road guys who I'd known for years and was glad to have them. I called them in, and the only person in my section that I didn't call into work was the one who I had tasked to be primary with the Lewiston case. I said, but you're going to have enough work. And that was Friday night, Saturday, and then Saturday night into Sunday, we identified a suspect, made an arrest. And by Sunday morning, we were kicking him out. So we were headed out of Lewiston. What the general public didn't understand is the same people that had just spent less than 48 hours basically on no sleep working to get answers to this. Half of them, a couple of days later, were out working a case that had been going on for 2 months. So they didn't see the backstory prior to that. And then the other half that still had work on the actual incident itself then got tasked with another homicide on top of that in a city that was like, I remember walking in and seeing the faces on those guys from the PD, and they had been out looking for the vehicle, couldn't find it. I looked at them, I'm like, guys, go home. Like, they'd all been ordered in because the president had been in town that day. I'm like, go home. Like, you guys have been through the ringer. A lot of them were the first responders to that shooting. They were the ones running in. Go home. We got it. We'll figure our way through this city. We've been here enough. We'll get there.
Yeah.
And then you had 2 weeks later, there were 8 homicides in 8 days, and five of them were in our unit. We had to call our northern unit to come back down to take one of them to basically help us out because we didn't have enough. The other 3 were in our central unit, all within the span of a month. You had that just in this basically Augusta South. So we have all that work, and then you have the commission that they wanted all the case reports and everything by mid-December. By Christmas, basically, is when they wanted it.
Wow.
They were tasked by the governor. They were tasked by whatever your political beliefs are. I don't care. It doesn't bother me which left, right, center. I don't really care. But when politics get involved in this stuff, that commission then spent probably, for me, I spent all of December. And so you had all the other cases that we worked after this. We had another double homicide in December that we worked. So most of late November and into December was spent gathering those reports, along with, thankfully, there was plenty of help from one of the lieutenants up at headquarters. Our command staff was awesome. And then a bunch of us got tasked with testifying in front of this commission in February. And then again, I think it was in like April or May. I can't remember. So you had all that. The case for me, really, I mean, I just dealt with it actually last Friday. I was still getting something that the commission wanted. So I had to track it down and provide them the documentation of it. So it's that side that the general public may not see.
Nope.
That just people in general. And even sometimes I don't think law enforcement, they see the person sitting in front of the commission or testifying or all that, but they don't see the work. I think it was like some ridiculous amount of data, 2 terabytes, 3 terabytes of, if not more. I can't remember, but it was some ridiculous amount of data that we provided to them in the span of, I would say by January 1st, they had 80% of all the reports. So it was, I'm in training in Las Vegas and get up in the morning, go in, see who submitted a report, read it, approve it, come back from training for an hour or 2 before we went out to have dinner. Same thing for on the airplane, same thing, back and forth. That's the stuff that ended up wearing on. I know for me, it was a bear. I know for the primary detective, that was a bear for him because he was dealing with the victims' families with the questions and all that stuff. So those are the hidden stressors that people don't see that are what becomes a bigger issue later on down. Not an issue, but those are the ones that can be more stressful than the actual incident itself.
Yeah, Mo, just so you understand, the state police covers the homicides for the entire state.
Yeah, I'm listening to this and I'm just blown away. That's for us, it would be like Florida Highway Patrol covering all of Florida for the homicides, which they could never do. So
right. We're broken up into 3 units, but that was just our unit down here who That's had wild. That. We had, I think it was 36 in 2023. It was 36 homicides. So 18 from this one incident and then 18 others on top of that. That's just myself, one other sergeant, a lieutenant, and 12 detectives.
That's insane. That's where when like we've talked on previous episodes and people saying how law enforcement is blue collar and this, that, and the other. And I'm like, you guys don't understand the mental fortitude it takes to manage all of these things that are going on, that the level of professionalism that it takes to take a scene where you have 18 people that have been murdered and then have to also think about, well, we had cases before and we have cases after, and being able to be professionally enough to give them all the same level of service, essentially. That's why when people are always like, well, being a cop is blue collar, I'm like, you clearly have no idea the amount of mental fortitude it takes to be a cop and do what it is that they do. We do.
Yeah, no, for sure. Chris, that's all I got, man. That actually was more than I thought it was going to be. I mean, I understand, but getting the brain going and getting the different perspectives, I really appreciate it. Because again, you hit all the points because, one, it's a horrific incident that occurs, trying to figure out, control the scene, find the guy. Once you find the guy, you got to lay it out. It's not like the work stops and you just clear the call with notes and you're done. It doesn't work that way. And then, yeah, right.
No, I think, I appreciate you coming on. It's really the first time I've kind of talked publicly about it. I've testified in front of the commission, which it's just stating the facts. But, I said it in front of our unit and I would say it in front of anyone. 2023 put a lot of pressure on a lot of newer detectives, plus a lot of seasoned detectives. And to have guys and girls go from working a case for months on end, hours on end, and they're working that, other guys are working on. I covered a baby death the same morning as the shooting with one other detective. So you have guys who are doing that, and then they literally dropped everything that they had, and for basically 48 hours, put everything, heart, soul, sweat, blood, tears, whatever you want to say, into trying to find this guy. And those are just and then he's found deceased, so we don't even get the chance to go to trial. Right. We don't even get the chance to put him away, put him in jail, which all our work entails. She did all that work really I kept having to tell myself, we did it for the victim so they can maybe have some closure on what happened. And then Monday morning, the next day, everybody's back pivoting to these other cases and working to making arrests on these other cases. Is just super proud of our detectives that worked all these cases. And then, like I said at the beginning, those first responders, whether it's troopers, wardens, deputies, local officers they didn't get enough credit, I feel like, my personal opinion, because it got roped up into the typical what happens, something gets politicized. Those guys right there, the firefighters, the EMTs, I mean, they were transporting people in pickup trucks. They were doing whatever they could to save lives and find the bad guys. Those are the guys who I wish would get more credit. My ugly mug was seen on front of the commission. I wish it was the wardens, the deputies, the troopers that went running in, to try to render aid, and some of them that rendered aid, applied tourniquets, did all the stuff that we're trained to do. In my mind, those are the guys that need to be front and center, not me here sitting in the background, but just explaining that I got to go talk to a few people and read a search warrant or two. And then, now we're sitting here talking about it. But no, I appreciate you letting me come on. It was, like I said, first time I've really talked publicly. Even I don't know if my wife knows. She knows enough, but I don't know if I've told her a ton. So I appreciate it.
No, dude, I appreciate you and I appreciate you sharing it. And you touched on it, but just food for thought as we ended. One of my mentors, Shiro, love that guy. But I remember I was kind of bitching, like, man, who cares? These guys are fucking shitheads. He goes, no, you're taking someone's freedom away. You need to do your best job. You're a professional now. And him saying that to me, touching on what you said, Mo, it's not blue collar. Like, you need to know what the fuck you're doing. But also with that being said, it's like you put all this work, blood, sweat, tears, mental powers. I don't know what not sleeping for 48 hours does to your body. I'm sure it's not good. And then to have it questioned either in the court of law or by somebody who's on a commission, regardless of political stance, keeping your composure is very important.
No, it's those tolls. It's what, people, I think all three of us have been there and are still doing it, where, it's not the most glamorous job in the world, but it's one that, it's that saying, if not me, then who? Like, I hate using that sometimes, but, there's certain people who have to do it and have chose to do it. And then, it's one of those of, we got a job to do, but we got to do it right, because it's not something that can be taken lightly or seriously. Because like you said, Tyler, we we're given a lot of power, and we can take people's rights away, we can take people's lives away, but we also have a job to protect people and try to answer questions for them. And in a case like this, you had 18 people whose lives were taken for no other than they wanted to go bowl, or they wanted to go have a bite to eat and play some cornhole. So our job is to try to find who did it, who's responsible, and bring justice to them. And in this case, we didn't get the ending result that I think would have been, challenging in and of itself, but I think would have been really interesting to be part of a full trial of that style and that size. Instead, you have to look at, I've talked to a few of the victims here or there, and, they were asking questions, and some of it, you just go to them like, I wish I could tell you that, but we don't know, or we can't. But, being there and seeing the support the community came for the city was, in a time up here where, we've all been through it, where the cops have looked down upon the city of Lewiston, and the state really did respond in a positive light, like the Lewiston Strong, the community, somebody came, shake my hand, said, hey, thank you for what you did. Daughter's swim team sent me $100, Dunkin' Donuts gift card out of the blue. Friends were taking my kids out to dinner while I was working. Stuff like that makes you realize there are still good people out and about.
No, absolutely. Mo, anything?
I just want to say, Chris, I appreciate you taking the time to honor the families, honor the victims, share this story with us, because I think that sometimes the media wants to share a lot of what's going to give them the most ratings, and some of the stuff that's really important that's going on behind the scenes and what matters to the families of the victims gets kind of lost in the shuffle because it's not what gives them ratings. So I appreciate it so much. Thank you for sharing. Thank you for letting us ask you questions and pick your brain.
Glad to. It's truly a pleasure.